The silence before the Storm Theater was full. Cameras flashed, lights burned bright, and the crowd buzzed with excitement. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, a night where Keanu Reeves would receive a Lifetime Achievement Award for his decades of work and kindness. But as he stepped onto the stage, something inside him felt heavy. Something he had kept buried for years was now rising to the surface. He had practiced his speech 100 times. He had smiled at the rehearsals, shook hands with producers, even laughed with the young actors who grew up watching him. But none of it felt real. Not tonight. Not when he knew who was sitting in the front row, Sandra Bullock. They hadn't spoken properly in years. Not since the quiet fallout that neither of them ever addressed. It wasn't anger or betrayal that separated them. It was life, silent choices, missed chances, and a fear of saying what needed to be said. As he walked up to the microphone, his heart pounded in his chest. The applause faded into silence. He looked down at the audience and saw her, dressed in a simple black gown, eyes locked on him. Her expression was unreadable, but her presence was louder than the entire crowd. "Thank you," Keanu began, his voice steady but distant. "This award means a lot, but tonight, I want to speak not just about films or fame or the work. I want to speak about people, about the ones who shape who we are." The crowd listened quietly. His tone had changed. It was no longer a speech. It was a confession. "You see, success doesn't happen in a vacuum. We like to believe we earned everything, that we stood alone. But the truth is, it's the people beside us who make us who we are." He paused, his voice trembling slightly. "And there's one person here tonight without whom I would not be standing here." All eyes turned toward Sandra. Keanu's gaze did not leave her. "We met at a time when I was lost," he continued softly. "She believed in me when I doubted myself. She saw kindness in me when I felt empty. She made me laugh when I forgot how. And though life took us in different directions, her impact never left me." A murmur ran through the audience. Sandra's eyes softened, and for a brief second, a memory crossed both their minds. A late-night conversation on a film set, the shared jokes, the unspoken bond. Keanu's throat tightened. "We don't always say the things we should. We assume people know, but I don't want to assume anymore." He took a breath. The next words felt heavier than any role he had ever played. "Sandra, thank you." For a moment, there was silence. She didn't move. He could have ended it there, with a polite acknowledgement, but something deep inside him refused to stop. "But thank you isn't enough," he added, his voice breaking slightly. "I owe you more than words, and there's something I should have told you a long time ago." The audience leaned forward. Camera zoomed in. Sandra's lips parted slightly, as if bracing for something she had both expected and dreaded. Keanu hesitated. It felt like the entire weight of his life was pressing against his chest. "I love you." "Maybe I still do." A hush fell over the room. Gasps echoed across the hall. Sandra blinked, stunned, not because she hadn't suspected, but because hearing it now, here, in front of the world, shattered something deep inside her. The silence stretched on. Keanu lowered his head, emotion swelling in his chest. He had said it, words he had swallowed for decades, and now they hung in the air, fragile and real. And then, slowly, Sandra stood up. She didn't speak right away. The crowd waited. Keanu's breath caught in his throat. He didn't know if she would walk out, stay silent, or speak. But then, with tears glistening in her eyes, she whispered 3 words. 3 simple words that would change everything. "I always did." Keanu's knees almost buckled. His breath hitched. His carefully built walls collapsed in an instant. It was as if time stopped. All the missed moments, the years of silence, the unspoken feelings, they all rushed back at once. The audience erupted into applause, but he didn't hear it. He didn't see the cameras, the lights, the faces. He saw only her, Sandra, the woman who had once been his best friend, his greatest what if, and now, maybe, his second chance. Tears rolled down his face before he could stop them. He didn't care. For the first time in decades, Keanu Reeves, the man known for his calm, his quiet strength, broke down on stage. But it wasn't sadness that overwhelmed him. It was relief. It was love. It was the realization that some bonds, no matter how much time passes, never truly fade. As he stepped down from the stage, the applause still echoing around him, Sandra took a step forward too. They met halfway, somewhere between past and future, between regret and possibility. And in that silent space, without any more words, they held each other, to hearts that had waited too long. Finally finding their way home. It was not the ending either of them had planned, but it was the beginning of something neither of them had dared to hope for. And for the first time in a long time, Keanu believed that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. Asterisk the weight of yesterday. Next morning, headlines around the world told the same story. Keanu Reeves breaks down on stage after Sandra Bullock's three-word confession. The video of the moment spread everywhere, shared millions of times within hours. Reporters called it the most emotional moment of the decade. Fans cried, celebrities commented, and the internet could talk about nothing else. But while the world was celebrating a moment of raw emotion, Keanu was quietly sitting by his kitchen window, staring at the sunrise over Los Angeles. His phone buzzed nonstop, messages from journalists, producers, even people he hadn't spoken to in years. But the only message he truly cared about still hadn't come. Sandra hadn't called. He had replayed those three words in his head over and over again. I always did. Each time he heard them in his memory, they hit a different part of his soul. They were beautiful, yes, but also painful, because they carried a question he wasn't ready to face. If she always did, why didn't they ever try? His thoughts drifted back to the past, to the early days on set when they were inseparable. They had shared coffee breaks, late-night walks, endless conversations about life, dreams, and fears. But both of them had been too careful, too cautious. They told themselves friendship was enough, that timing wasn't right. And so, they buried their feelings under smiles and small talk. But time has a way of testing what we bury. And now, decades later, all that silence had exploded into three little words that refused to leave his mind. His doorbell rang. Keanu's heart skipped. Maybe it was her. Maybe she had come, but it wasn't. It was his manager, Rachel, holding a tablet full of interview requests. Keanu, everyone wants a piece of you right now, she said gently. Morning shows, late-night hosts, even a book deal. They all want to know what happened on that stage. I don't want to talk about it. He replied softly. You have to, she insisted. This moment is huge. People want to hear your side. There's no side. He said, I still on the sunrise. There's just truth. And I said mine. Rachel's side. She had known Keanu long enough to recognize that tone. It wasn't stubbornness. It was something deeper. A man still trying to understand his own heart. Later that afternoon, a private envelope arrived at his doorstep. No return address, no name, just his name written in handwriting he instantly recognized. Sandra. He hesitated before opening it, afraid of what it might say. Inside was a short note, written with the same simplicity that had always defined her. I didn't plan to say it. I didn't even plan to stand up. But when you spoke, something inside me broke free. I don't know what this means for us now. I don't know if it's too late. But if you're willing, maybe we should talk. As Keanu read the note 3 times, his hands trembling slightly. She hadn't closed the door. She hadn't run away. But she also hadn't promised anything. It was an invitation, fragile, uncertain, but real. And so, that evening, he sent a message. I'd like that. Tomorrow? The reply came minutes later. Tomorrow. Same cafe as always. The always was a memory. A little hidden spot in West Hollywood they had visited often in the past. Away from the cameras, where they had shared long talks about life and dreams. As he prepared to meet her, Keanu's heart wrestled with a storm of feelings, excitement, fear, regret, and hope. What if they were too different now? What if time had changed them too much? What if the love they once felt had faded into something unrecognizable? The next day, the cafe was almost empty when he arrived. It still looked the same, the old wooden tables, the smell of freshly brewed coffee, the quiet hum of soft music. He chose their usual corner table and waited. 10 minutes later, she walked in. No red carpet makeup, no glamorous dress, just Sandra, jeans, a sweater, hair tied back, simple, familiar, heartbreakingly real. Their eyes met, and for a moment, it was like no time had passed at all. Hi, she said softly as she sat down. Hi, he replied, his voice equally quiet. There was a long pause. Neither knew where to begin. That night, she started, then stopped. I didn't mean to say it out loud. I know, he said gently, but I'm glad you did. So am I. Silence again. Not awkward, just heavy. Why didn't we ever try? He asked finally, the question that had haunted him for years. She sighed. Because we were scared. Scared of ruining what we had. Scared of the spotlight. Scared of not being enough for each other. And now Now, I don't know, she admitted. Maybe we're still scared, but maybe we're older and wiser. Maybe we know that chances like this don't come twice. Her eyes held his, searching for something, maybe forgiveness, maybe courage. Keanu, she whispered, if we do this, if we really try, we can't run again. We have to face everything. The past, the press, the what-ifs, all of it. I know, he said, and I want to. Her eyes softened, and for the first time in a long time, she smiled, a small, genuine smile that reminded him of who they were before fame, before fear. Then let's start with coffee, she said quietly. No promises, just coffee, and so they did. They talked for hours, about the past, about the roles that changed them, about the people they had become. They laughed, they cried, they remembered, and in those conversations, something old and familiar began to breathe again. As the sun set outside the cafe window, Keanu realized something profound. Love doesn't disappear. It waits, sometimes for years, sometimes for decades. But when the right words are finally spoken, it returns, stronger, deeper, more honest. And maybe, just maybe, this was their second chance. But what they didn't know was that their story was about to face a storm far bigger than anything they had imagined. A storm that would test not just their love, but everything they believed about themselves and each other. Asterisk when the past knocks game for the next few weeks. Keanu and Sandra slipped quietly into a rhythm they hadn't known in years. There were no dramatic declarations, no paparazzi chase dates, no glittering red carpet appearances together. Just coffee meetups, long evening walks through quiet streets, and messages that lasted deep into the night. It was soft, careful, and real, to people relearning each other after years of silence. But beneath the calm surface, something darker was brewing. The world had seen their moment on stage, and not everyone was happy about it. Some called it the greatest love story Hollywood had ever seen. Others whispered that it was a publicity stunt. A few even claimed it was too late for them, that their time had passed. And then there were the ghosts from their past. One evening, as Keanu left a meeting in downtown Los Angeles, his phone buzzed with a message from a blocked number. Does she know the truth about why you left all those years ago? His heart froze. He knew exactly who it was. He had tried to forget that part of his past, the one decision he regretted more than any other. The reason he had quietly distanced himself from Sandra back then wasn't just timing or fear. It was something he had never told her, something he had promised himself would stay buried forever. But the past has a cruel way of finding you when you're happiest. That night, he couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, replaying the memory again and again. It was over 20 years ago, but the guilt felt as fresh as if it had happened yesterday. They had just finished filming their second movie together. Feelings were growing stronger, though neither of them admitted it. Then came an offer, a major project overseas, one that would define his career, but would also mean leaving for years. He had planned to tell Sandra, to ask her if they could try long distance, maybe even build something real. But then, he received news that changed everything. His younger sister was diagnosed with a serious illness. The treatment was expensive, and the only way he could afford it was by taking an overseas role. He left suddenly, without a real explanation, shutting everyone out, even her and Sandra, not knowing the reason. Assumed he simply didn't care enough to stay. It was the only lie, or rather, the only silence, that had ever stood between them. And now, someone out there knew about it. 2 days later, Sandra called. There was something different in her voice. Distant, guarded. Hey, he said softly. Is everything okay? I don't know, she replied. I got a message today from someone claiming you left me because of someone else. Keanu's heart sank. That's not true. I want to believe you, she whispered. But you didn't tell me why you left. You never did, because it was complicated, he said. And I didn't want to hurt you. You did anyway. Silence. A silence that felt heavier than any they had shared before. Can we meet? He asked quietly. I'll tell you everything. No more secrets. She agreed. They met that evening at the same cafe where they had rekindled their connection. But this time, the air between them was tense. Sandra's eyes searched his face, not for charm or comfort, but for truth. Tell me, she said. All of it. And so he did. He told her about his sister, about the diagnosis, about the financial pressure, and about the choice that tore him apart, choosing his family's survival over their future. When he finished, there was no anger on her face, just quiet heartbreak. You could have told me, she said, her voice trembling. I would have understood. I would have helped. I didn't want you to carry that burden. He said, you had your own life, your own dreams. I thought disappearing would make it easier. It didn't, she whispered. It made everything worse. Keanu's voice cracked. I'm sorry. I was trying to do the right thing. But I hurt the only person who truly mattered. Her eyes softened slightly, but she looked away. You know what hurts the most? Not that you left. Not even that you kept it a secret. It's that you didn't trust me enough to face it together. He reached across the table, but she didn't take his hand. I trust you now, he said. With everything, maybe, she murmured, but trust isn't built overnight. She stood to leave, and his heart ached. Are we done? He asked, barely able to get the words out. No, she said softly, but we're not where we thought we were either. I need time. I need to think. And then she walked away. For the first time since that night on stage, Keanu felt truly alone again. Not because she didn't care, but because love, no matter how strong, needs trust to survive. As he sat there in the empty cafe, he realized something painful, but true. Their second chance was real, but it wasn't guaranteed. And if he wanted to hold on to it, he would have to rebuild everything from the ground up. But what neither of them knew was that this wasn't just about the past anymore. The message wasn't from a stranger. It was from someone who had been watching, waiting, and planning. Someone who wanted to tear them apart before they could truly come together. And their next challenge wouldn't come from old wounds. It would come from betrayal still waiting to strike. Asterisk shadows in the spotlight days after their conversation felt heavier than any Keanu could remember. Sandra hadn't cut him off, but she also hadn't called. She hadn't replied to his messages, and the silence between them felt louder with every passing hour. He tried to keep busy, meetings, interviews, script readings, but everything felt hollow. Every question from journalists about the most beautiful love story in Hollywood was a stab in the chest. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know how fragile that love was, how close it was to breaking again. And then, one evening, as he was leaving the studio, a man in a dark suit approached him near the parking lot. He was tall, well-dressed, and had a strange confidence in his step. Mr. Reeves, he said calmly. We should talk. About what? Keanu asked, wary. About Sandra, the man replied with a faint smile. And about how quickly everything you built with her could disappear. Keanu's heart tightened. Who are you? Someone who knows more about your past than she does, the man said. And someone willing to make sure it becomes very, very public. Unless you cooperate. Keanu stared at him, anger rising. Are you threatening me? Let's just say I'm offering you a chance to protect her, the man said. Walk away. Disappear again. If you don't, stories will come out. Stories that will destroy not only what she feels for you, but what the world thinks of you. What stories? Keanu asked, voice steady, but cold. The man smiled. The truth. Twisted just enough to ruin everything, and with that, he walked away, leaving the card behind with just 2 words printed on it. 48 hours. Keanu's chest tightened as he stared at the card. Who was this man? How did he know about the past? And what exactly was he planning to reveal? He knew one thing for certain. Whoever was behind this wasn't just some random stranger. This was calculated, personal. And then, as he sat in his car trying to make sense of it all, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Sandra. Can we meet tomorrow? His heart jumped. Maybe there was still hope. Maybe they could fix this before everything fell apart. The next day, they met in a quiet park, away from cameras and crowds. Sandra looked tired, not physically, but emotionally, as if the weight of everything had finally caught up to her. I've been thinking a lot, she said as they sat on a bench beneath a tree. About us, about the past, about everything. And Keanu asked gently, and I don't want to lose you again, she admitted. But I also don't want to build something on broken trust. I need to know that there's nothing else you're hiding. Nothing that's going to surprise me. His chest tightened. Part of him wanted to lie, to tell her there was nothing left. But another part, the part that loved her deeply, knew that lying now would destroy them both. There's something you need to know, he said quietly. Someone approached me yesterday. Someone who wants to hurt us. Her brows furrowed. Hurt us how? They said they'd release things from my past if I didn't walk away, he admitted. They want to scare me off. Who? I don't know yet. But whoever they are, they know about my sister, about why I left, and they're threatening to twist it. Sandra was silent for a long moment. Then, Instead of anger, she reached for his hand. "Thank you for telling me. You're not angry?" he asked. "I'm scared," she said honestly. "But I'm not angry. Secrets hurt more when they're hidden. If we're honest, we can face anything." Her words were like a balm to his heart. But even as he held her hand, a chill ran through him. Honesty wouldn't be enough if the person behind this was determined to destroy them. Later that night, Keanu hired a private investigator, an old friend who had helped him in the past. Within 24 hours, the investigator had a name, and when Keanu heard it, his blood went cold. It wasn't a stranger. It was someone from Sandra's world, a man named Daniel Hartman, a powerful studio executive and, years ago, Sandra's former fiancé. They had broken up quietly before she met Keanu, but Daniel had never truly let go. He had influence, money, and a grudge, and now, it seemed, he had a plan. 2 days later, his plan began. Tabloids exploded with stories about Keanu's past, half-truths twisted into accusations. Headlines screamed that he had abandoned Sandra years ago to chase fame, that he had lied about his family, that he was using her now to revive his career. Paparazzi camped outside both their homes. Reporters shouted questions whenever they stepped outside. Social media was a storm of judgment and speculation, but the worst part wasn't the noise. It was the silence from Sandra. She didn't answer his calls for 3 days. When she finally did, her voice was distant. "I need space," she said quietly. "This is too much. Don't let him win," Keanu pleaded. "He wants to break us apart." "I know," she whispered, "but right now, I don't know how to fight it." And then she hung up. Keanu stared at the phone, his heart shattering. It felt like history was repeating itself. Secrets, silence, separation. Only this time, the pain was deeper because he knew exactly what he stood to lose. But deep inside, something hardened. He wasn't going to lose her. Not this time. He had walked away once before, and it haunted him for years. He would not make the same mistake twice. And so, with the world turning against him and his reputation under attack, Keanu made a decision. He would confront Daniel Hartman directly. Not in court, not through lawyers, but face to face, man to man. He didn't know how it would end, but he knew one thing. He would fight for her, even if it meant losing everything else. Because love, real love, was worth every risk. And the next move he made would change not only their story, but the course of both their lives. After his fight for what's real night before the confrontation, Keanu barely slept. He sat by the window in the dark, watching the city lights blur beneath the rain, and felt the weight of everything pressing down on his chest. The headlines, the judgment, the silence from Sandra. But more than all of that, it was the memory of her voice whispering, "I always did," that echoed in his mind. He had already lost her once by running away. This time, if he lost her, it would be fighting. He had no plan, no speech prepared. All he had was determination. By morning, he was standing outside Daniel Hartman's towering glass office building. Security guards recognized him instantly. The world's most beloved actor showing up unannounced was not something they were prepared for. But Keanu wasn't here as a movie star. He was here as a man who had been pushed too far. Daniel was sitting behind a polished mahogany desk when Keanu walked in, his calm expression hiding the storm beneath. "KeanuReeves," he said coolly, leaning back in his chair. "To what do I owe this visit?" "Stop," Keanu said simply. "Whatever you're doing, stop now." Daniel smirked. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't play games," Keanu said, his voice steady but sharp. "You're leaking stories, twisting my past, trying to destroy what Sandra and I have. And for what? Because she chose not to marry you?" Daniel's smile faded. "Because she humiliated me," he hissed. "Because she walked away from everything we built without a second thought. And now you think you can come back into her life like none of that matters?" "This isn't about the past," Keanu said. "This is about now. And now she deserves peace. She deserves truth. And you're too afraid to see her happy with someone else. She'll never choose you." Daniel sneered. "Not after I'm finished. I'll make sure every studio, every network, every sponsor sees you as a fraud. Your career will be ashes, and she'll walk away just to save her own." Keanu stepped closer, his eyes locked on Daniel's. "Then do it," he said quietly. "Ruin me. Take everything. But you won't take her choice away. If she leaves me, it will be because she wants to, not because you manipulated her into it." For the first time, Daniel looked shaken. Keanu's calm wasn't weakness. It was power. It was the strength of a man who had lost more than Daniel could ever imagine and still stood tall. "You're a fool," Daniel muttered. Double quotes, "No," Keanu said softly. "I'm in love." He turned and walked away without another word. Daniel shouted something behind him, but Keanu didn't care. This wasn't about winning a fight. It was about standing for something real. That evening, he decided to do something no publicist would ever advise. He called a press conference. No scripts, no rehearsed answers. Just truth. The room was packed. Cameras, microphones, flashing lights all pointed at him. He waited for the noise to settle, then stepped up to the podium. "I've spent my whole life playing roles," he began quietly. "Heroes, villains, wanderers, dreamers. But none of that matters today. Today, I'm here as just a man, one who made mistakes, one who carries regrets, and one who still believes in love." The room fell silent. Every word carried weight. "Years ago, I left someone I cared about deeply," he continued. "Not because I stopped loving her, but because life threw me into a storm I didn't know how to face. I made choices I thought were right at the time, but they hurt people, and I will carry that regret forever." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "But love isn't about pretending to be perfect. It's about showing up, even when it's hard, even when the world tries to tear you apart. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm showing up." Reporters shouted questions. Was he talking about Sandra? Were the rumors true? But Keanu didn't answer. Instead, he ended with the only words that truly mattered. "If she's watching this, I want her to know I never stopped caring, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of her trust again. Not with promises, with actions." Within hours, the video went viral. Fans flooded social media with messages of support. Even critics called it the most honest speech they had ever seen from a Hollywood star. But none of that mattered to Keanu. All he cared about was whether Sandra had seen it, and whether she believed him. For 3 days, he heard nothing. Then, one night, as he sat alone in his living room, there was a soft knock on the door. When he opened it, Sandra was standing there. No cameras, no entourage, just her. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "Yes, I did," he replied, "because if we're going to have any chance at this, it has to start with honesty." She looked at him for a long moment, then stepped inside. "You really meant every word?" she asked. "Every single one." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I was so angry, so hurt. But then I watched that speech, and it reminded me why I fell for you in the first place." Keanu's heart pounded. "And now, she whispered, "I want to believe in us again. But I need to know this isn't just words. I need to see that you're willing to build something real, slowly, carefully, and together." He nodded, stepping closer. "Then that's what we'll do. One day at a time, for the first time in weeks." She smiled, not the polite smile for cameras, but the soft, real smile that once made him believe in love again. They stood there, in the quiet of his living room, the noise of the world shut out. And for the first time since that night on stage, hope felt real again. But just as their hearts began to heal, a storm neither of them saw coming was about to shake their world once more. One final test that would decide if their love could truly survive everything. The storm before the sunrise of weeks that followed were quieter, almost peaceful. Keanu and Sandra began rebuilding what they once lost, one small step at a time. There were no grand gestures, no rushed promises, just simple moments. Sunday morning breakfasts, late-night phone calls, long walks where they spoke not about the past, but about the future. And slowly, the walls that had once stood between them began to crumble. But love, no matter how deep, is never free from tests. And theirs was about to face the biggest one yet. It began on a Wednesday morning. Keanu woke up to a message from his publicist that made his blood run cold. Daniel Hartman had filed a lawsuit, a defamation suit for character damage caused by Keanu's press conference. But that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was the leaked documents attached to the lawsuit. They weren't about Keanu. They were about Sandra. Financial records, private emails, and a deeply personal letter she had written years ago, all twisted into a story claiming she had used her influence to manipulate studios and favor projects connected to Keanu. It was a complete fabrication, but it was dangerous. The story hit the media within hours. Headlines accused Sandra of career corruption and favoritism. Sponsors started to back away from deals. Scripts she had been offered were suddenly under reconsideration, and worse, people online, people who once adored her, turned against her overnight. When Keanu rushed to her home that afternoon, he found her sitting alone on the floor, surrounded by unopened letters and a phone that wouldn't stop buzzing. Her eyes were red. "They're calling me a fraud," she whispered. "They're saying everything I've achieved was because of you." "None of that is true," Keanu said, kneeling beside her. "You built everything on your own. They know that. But does it matter what's true anymore?" she asked, her voice breaking. "In this industry, perception is reality. And right now, the world thinks I'm a liar." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Maybe this was a mistake," she said softly. "Maybe us being together brings out the worst in everything." "Don't say that," Keanu pleaded. "Don't let them win." "I'm not sure I have the strength to fight this," she whispered. Not again. That night was the longest of Keanu's life. He lay awake thinking of every way to protect her, every move he could make to shield her from the storm. And by morning, he had made a decision, one that terrified him but felt necessary. At sunrise, he called a press conference, not about himself, about her. When he stepped onto the stage, the cameras were already waiting, hungry for another headline. He took a deep breath and began. "I've stood on many stages in my life," he said, his voice steady. "But today is different. Today, I'm not here to talk about movies or awards. I'm here to talk about someone who deserves better than the lies being told about her." He spoke about Sandra, not as a co-star, not as a love interest, but as a person. He told the world about the kindness she showed to struggling actors, the projects she funded quietly without credit, the way she fought for fair pay for women behind the scenes. He revealed how he had been the one to benefit from her strength, not the other way around. And then he said something that silenced the entire room. "If being with me is what's causing her pain, if my presence in her life is what's making her a target, then I will walk away, not because I don't love her, but because I do." More than anything, the room exploded with questions. But Keanu walked away without answering a single one. Hours later, Sandra showed up at his door. Her eyes were swollen from crying. She stood silently for a moment before speaking. "You meant that?" she asked. "You'd really walk away from me? If it meant you could live without being hunted," he said softly, "then yes. I'd rather see you shine without me than watch you break because of me." She stepped closer, tears sliding down her cheeks. "You're an idiot," she whispered. He blinked. "What? You think I want a life without you?" she said, her voice trembling. "I don't care about the headlines. I don't care about the hate. I care about us. I've spent too many years wondering what might have been. I'm not walking away now, not when we finally have a chance." And then, without another word, she kissed him, not the soft, hesitant kiss of old memories, but a fierce, certain one, a promise sealed between the people who had weathered too many storms to give up now. In the weeks that followed, the lawsuit collapsed under the weight of false evidence. Daniel was exposed for manipulating data and coercing sources. His career crumbled overnight. The public, once quick to judge, turned on him, and in doing so, turned back to Sandra and Keanu with overwhelming support. But for them, none of that mattered anymore, because what they had learned through all the pain, betrayal, and chaos was this: love isn't proven in the calm. It's proven in the storm. Months later, on a quiet evening far from the spotlight, Keanu and Sandra sat on the steps of a small lake house they had bought together, not in Hollywood, but in a hidden corner of Oregon, where the world couldn't find them. "Do you ever think about how different life could have been?" she asked softly, resting her head on his shoulder. "All the time," he said. "But then I look at you, and I realize I wouldn't change a single second, because every wrong turn still led me here." She smiled. To us," he whispered. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in gold and violet, they sat there, two souls who had lost each other once, fought through 1,000 storms, and finally found their way home. Because love, when it's real, doesn't end with a confession on stage. It begins there, and it builds, and it breaks, and it rebuilds stronger than before. And in that golden light, Keanu Reeves knew one thing with absolute certainty. Those 3 words, "I always did," had not just broken him, they had saved him.